Papers in the pocket and I'll change in London.
Okay. Bye.
See you later.
So far as this question of exclusivity is concerned, I cannot see that is any question at all. If you join a dance club or a fishing club, any kind of club you want, the idea of a club is to come together to share fellowship. Now that's not the same as an association. In an association, people often join so that they can get benefits. But the idea of a club is that it is a question of what you can put in. It's the fellowship, the love, the friendship that you show to each other. So it's really almost like a family. Interestingly, we never call each other members of the Savage or gentlemen. We are always addressed as brothers. And the atmosphere is that of a big, happy, slightly crazy family.
There is only really one fixed tradition about what you discuss in clubs. You can talk about sex, you can talk about religion, you can even talk about politics, but you don't discuss business. It is the one area where people actually get away from the pressures of the outside working world, and where you can relax with a drink and enjoy the company of your friends. I welcome you to the Architecture Club. We meet all over the place. We've met on a boat in the Thames, we've met in Buckingham Palace. Tonight we're in Carlton House Terrace looking at a magnificent restoration of a 19th century Georgian building. Of course we're half architects and half, like me, what they call opinion formers. I first came to the club as a speaker in the 70s. I spoke here with Ernst Schumacher, that wonderful, clear-sighted man who propounded the view that small is beautiful. And because it's only half architects, it means that should you find one of those architects that people like certain members of our royal family have accused of using long words to blind the public, or the rest of us quickly try and put it into context if we can. We took patterns from there. I mean, the patterns on the wall coverings, that's an Owen Jones pattern. And again, using the strong colour, we believe this room may have been very strong colour, probably red.
I don't think Alfred Morrison was your choice. Well, partly...
Well, no, I can tell you a story. We took colours from the ceiling. If you look close at the ceiling, there are 5 principal colours.
Come and let me introduce you to a friend of mine, Brian Bagnall. Brian was a university student, then went into architecture and subsequently has taken early retirement. Not to put his feet up, as you might imagine. This man is a scurrilous cartoonist for Britain's leading satirical magazine, Private Eye. And the people who are... That's true. And the people who see his cartoons imagine that he's a feckless youth of 26. And he's, well, gone 30 now, are you not, Brian?
Well, in fact, they do say that they're hoping to meet one of these young chaps at the new Centre Private Eye.
What are you doing for them at the moment?
I got them their Christmas cards.
Oh, really? With Mrs. Thatcher on the front?
Ma Thatcher and Dennis.
What else would it be?
Mrs. Hacksaw, she said.
When savages get together, we do so to entertain ourselves, to have a drink, to relax, to chat, to get away from the pressures of the outside world. And and we're too much of a bohemian lot to have wanted to organise to buy property. But this does mean one wonderful advantage, because in coming to the National Liberal, not only have they been warm and welcoming hosts, but they've bequeathed to us the legacy of one of the most beautiful clubs in London. In recent years, the National Liberal has done something which every savage approves of. They've undergone an extensive programme of refurbishment and renovation to bequeath to the future one of the classical examples of English London club architecture and design at its most classical, ultra best. You know, I was thinking here at the Savage lunch table only the other day, the pressures that society puts on us to conform It's not surprising that whether your interests are rats, skateboarding, aerobics, swimming or tennis, that people with similar mentalities like to come together and enjoy fellowship. In fact, the categories for membership of the Savage that we have are laid down in the Constitution. They are science and art, literature, law, music and drama. But just being a member of a category, of course, isn't enough. There's also a need for a certain, not preeminence exactly, but a certain creative input into your field. What would normally happen is that a candidate member would be introduced by a Savage and in the fullness of time would be invited to meet the committee and to become a full member of the club. We do have a qualifications committee who look very closely at the criteria for membership. But, and this is the most important thing, at the end of the day, there is only one criterion that really matters, as I've often said to committee, and that is the quality of savageness. And nobody has ever tried to define that. And Brother Savage Paul Gain, in his day job, runs the Fortune Theatre as an impresario. Paul, do you not? How long have you done that?
Gosh, you say day job. I was once asked what you did in the daytime when you were running the theatre in the evening. I've been at the theatre about 10 years now, this one.
But it's not all you did.
No. The Fortune Theatre, first of all, you ought to say, is in fact in Covent Garden in London. And we've been running The Woman in Black here for a long while now, which is a ghost story. And we're currently preparing a new production of Marie Lloyd, a music hall show. But it's not all I did, you're quite right.
No, you were an actor. And other things too.
I was an actor. I was an actor for 10 years. And God knows some of the jobs I did at that time. I remember answering an advert to be an undertaker, and I did that for a short period too. But things have changed a lot since then. I've been in the film business too.
But this is a wonderful, intimate theatre, isn't it? It has a great sense of intimacy. How many seats have you got in it altogether?
Well, there are about 440 seats, and it has a big advantage, because being a small theatre, you can do intimate shows, which is what we're doing. And fortunately, we're very successful.
On this club thing, like me, you have association yourself with many other clubs, but if people said to either of us, which is your club, one would say, the Savage. Why is that for you, Paul?
Well, I've been a bit of the Savage now, probably about 15, 20 years. I think I identify with it emotionally. It's the sort of place that, I can think of a story. Somebody said, if you go in the Savage and there's no one there, the place is empty. But if you go in there and there's one person there, it's full.
Didn't you have these when you were a kid?
I had about 4 of these when I was a kid. Yeah. I bought this one from a bloke down in the pub. Very lucky, really. I was just waiting out there and they had walked outside. Where the pub is, in that area. And he felt like he was fine. You know what I'm saying?
I used to play keyboards in a rock band, and I remember seeing this poster. It was one of the first things that caught my eyes when I went into the Savage. I felt mightily relieved. But how did you feel the first time you went to the Savage show?
Do you think I've changed much?
Well, you've got a little younger looking over the years, but apart from that, no.
How did I feel? Well, I'll tell you what happened with me. Georgie Wood, remember wee Georgie Wood?
I do.
Well, Georgie was a great friend of mine, being a water rat.
Yeah.
And he said to me, let's come along to the Savage Club. It's a gentleman's club.
Yeah.
So I said, well, what do they want me there for? You know, he said, well, they love you there, you see. So I got this, I went along there to one of the house dinners.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, Georgie, who was well known for lumbering people, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly decided that to get up on the stage and say to all these eminent gentlemen, and now I'd like to introduce a fellow water rat who will get up
But he hadn't said to you you were going to do it?
and entertain you.
Good God.
And there's me stood up with all these wonderful blokes, you know, I mean, marvellous geezers. And, you know, and I had to sort of stand there talking about me mum. I thought to myself, what am I going to do, mum? And I thought, well, the best thing to do is talk about your mum.
The funniest story I ever remember being told about you was quoted by Jerry Bryant, Brother Savage, film director. He said that you and Spike Milligan were making a film together, and Spike said to you, why do you wear these narrow drain-pipe trousers and these pointed winkle pinkers? And you said to Spike, if I didn't wear the pointed shoes, I'd never get my feet through my trousers. Is that true?
Well, it actually, yes, the question's right, but the the fact that Spike Milligan, the film was called Spike Milligan Meets Joe Brown.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, I never met the bloke until about 16 years after.
Are you kidding?
No, what they did, you said, did a very dirty trick to us, really. They decided that they'd find a sort of a pop star, you know, and take the mickey out of him. So what they did, they got me along, and then the director of the show asked a load of questions, which Spike replaced on the film. So you had Larry Barnes, my manager. They said to Larry, Larry, would you carry on an imaginary telephone conversation? So Larry said, oh yes, yes. So he's picked the phone up and he said, yes, that's quite right. Yeah, oh yes, that's right. Yes, right. Goodbye. Put the phone down. See, fine. So next thing we know, this Spike's voice saying, is it true that you only pay your boys £14 a week and expect them to pay their own debts? And Larry's going, yes, that's right, fine, yes.
The Athenaeum Club is the most prestigious club in London. It's the one to which all the senior ministers, senior judges, senior professors all belong. It also has one of the longest histories of any London club. To come down and find people taking model photography outside it makes one realise just how attractive some of the older club buildings are in architectural terms. But I must add one word. It's certainly true the Athenaeum is the most prestigious. I don't know whether, as a member of the Savage, I would agree that it was necessarily the best.
The horse's name is James, one of the few remaining working horses in London. The coach behind me is a Brougham made in the early 1800s. And interestingly enough, it's not just an historic relic, for it reminds us of the fact that many of the buildings in London were built at about the same time in history. And some of them, of course, are now occupied by London clubs. An example of a kind of a scientific club, the Learned Society, the Linnean Society, stands in Burlington House, one of the most magnificent buildings that still stands here on Piccadilly. I say club because although it's a learned society, the Linnean has still managed to preserve that sense of fellowship that all true clubs should have. I first came here to consult them as a schoolboy, writing a thesis on the microscopical structure of ferns, and my function now is as inspector of scientific instruments for the society. We've just drawn up their first ever catalogue. It is said that in science we specialise too much, and this society is one of the few places where the scientists can get together with the explorer and the naturalist in an informal and social ambience. If you come into the meeting room, there's a reminder of the atmosphere of a club with the wood and leather seats and the great rows of the distinguished portraits of early fellows hanging round the wall. When I lecture in this room, their presence almost seems to become an intimidating reminder of the high standards of scholarship of earlier centuries. It's not easy to lapse into superficiality with these distinguished faces from an earlier era looking down from the walls. Nobody can be glib with the kindly eyes of Charles Darwin watching every movement as though listening to every word. There is always a danger with a society like ours that we slip into natural history and just stay there.
Well, that's not in the Charter, of course.
No, absolutely not.
The Charter is all of what was called natural history at that time. And I think one of the problems with the society is that it has drifted rather too close to the classification area.
That's right, and only that.
But I think we can say that there's interest now in the society in conserving species because the society has pitched its cap at preserving diversity.
Am I right in thinking, by the way, that we have now clinched for His Royal Highness to come in November, isn't it?
And indeed on fish conservation.
Oh, that's good.
So that he will be with us on the 30th of November, and he will be participating in a meeting on the preservation of salmon.
So that's what I like about the Linnean, is the fact that we have the scientific dimension, but unlike other learned societies, we also have a very profound and marked social calendar.
You mean we eat the salmon after the meeting on
Perhaps we ought to do that. By the way, I'm going to be able to do something for you on the simple microscope for the Constantione.
Right.
With the video equipment which we had with the grant. So it does mean that there will be something on microscopy for the next evening demonstration.
Well, I think that would be great, and particularly if you can reproduce what dear old Brown did all those years ago, which have certainly made him famous, though it has to be said, some years after he was dead.
That's true.
That's true, of course, of all artists.
I'm afraid it is.
That's right, Brian. Perhaps it'd be true of Ford as well.
Well, I'll do that, absolutely. No, anyway, I said the most important thing is to say it as though nothing in the world has happened. We are here.
And this is what I'm talking about, you see, about coincidence.
Yeah.
And I was very nervous. I was going around the house with the tape on, learning all that, you know, that John Lennon, that I am he, and you are he, and you are me, and we are all together, that one. And I thought, I'll never do this, because I've never done something before in my life. So anyway, I was getting a taxi, this is the bit. I was getting a taxi to go down to the concert, and the cab driver stopped, and put his head in the road, and he said, "Where are you going, whack?" He had this Liverpool accent. I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Liverpool." I said, "God, I'm just going down to do this concert. I mean, I'm doing Beatles songs." I said, he said, "Oh, wish I'd known how to come." He said, "In fact," he said, "I'm unique. I'm the only Liverpudlian cab driver in London."
It was a message from God.
No, from John Lennon.
Oh, all right.
God in heaven, well, John. 250,000 cab drivers, I'd pick up the one from Liverpool.
It was a message.
So I relaxed. I was not on to the second half. I slept on the floor of the dressing room. And then I came out and I walked on stage, and now 97 musicians behind me. It sounded like a waterfall. All this music. And I'm standing there, and suddenly I had no idea I was doing it. I had my hands in my pocket, and my eyes half closed. And suddenly I was going, "I am he, and you are he, and we are all together. See how they run like pigs from a gun, see how they fly." And I had no idea. It was as if it was like a seance, as if John had sort of come down and said, "Okay, Vic, go for it." It was astonishing. Anyway, do you know I was high on that for about, well, now, still am. It was sensational. I mean, I couldn't believe it. They recorded it, so, I mean, not that I listened to it, but I mean, it has been recorded. So, how are you? What you been doing?
Well, I've been dogged by a bunch of friends who have come over from Germany. And everywhere I turn around, my friends are, good evening again, my friends are here. And they're watching what we do, particularly in relation to clubs.
That's right. Hello. E. Gates. That's right. Oh, I'd learned German in school. I think I've forgotten most of it. When I was a kid. During the war, we were there learning German, and I was learning a bit of French and a bit of, I don't know what else.
3 minutes before the whiskey comes
on
out.
the train that, you know, on Sunday travel, they don't
I'll make a mental note, never ever to travel on the train on Sunday. Have a glass of scotch.
Oh, listen, I heard you the other day. On the radio.
On the gardening program.
On the gardening
I love doing that show.
But do you have a garden?
Yes, I'll show you. We have about 120 feet of garden. And I saw you on the telly doing that quote program. And what did I see under the distinguished visage?
The Savage Club.
The Savage Club time.
What?
Cheers to the club.
Yes, cheers.
To the club.
It's the first time I've ever joined. It's you, it was.
Indeed.
And it's been wonderful.
It's fun, isn't it?
Yes,
I like that.
lovely people.
Oh.
What you promised me when I come down was to look into your microscopes.
Microscopes?
Yes.
So, microscopes you wanted, and microscopes you shall see.
I know. Aren't they marvellous?
They are.
I mean, these sort of, all that brass thing, I mean, do you clean them a lot?
Well, you mustn't clean them too much, because otherwise you destroy the lacquer. They were covered with a sort of a glaze when they were made, and it's fatal to remove that.
You know, it's a funny thing. Now I'm an actor, right? But when I was a kid, what I really wanted to do was, I think, to be a scientist. I remember I always wanted a microscope. And I remember I saw an ad in a paper, somebody wanted to sell a mic. And I saved up the money. It was about £1 out of my pocket money. I was only a little tiny kid at the time. And it was in the next village to me. And I walked down to this village. It was a very hot day. I remember I had this £1 I'd saved up. And I went down and knocked the door. And this kid opened the door. And I said, "I got my £1 to buy the microscope." And he said, "That's not enough. I don't want to sell it." And he slammed the door. And that ended my career as a scientist.
So if it hadn't been for him, you might have ended up on microscopy.
Yeah, but I mean, I've always been fascinated by it. I mean, the kind of things you see. For example, that, I think I could have afforded that one.
Well, that little one, you see,
is intriguing, because that kind of microscope was in use before these were ever thought of. And although we always think that the invention of powerful microscopes, complicated microscopes, was vital for the modern discoveries that we've had, in fact most things like the cell, the nucleus, were discovered centuries before those microscopes were ever invented. And actually little tiny instruments like that can see most of the features that the best light microscopes of today can reveal.
But you know, sometimes people say, oh, the Houses of Parliament are like a club. On the other hand, of course, what kind of a club would it be that throws you out of membership if the public don't like you every few years?
You are a member of Parliament?
No, but we're making a movie about clubs.
Clubs.
And so the Houses of Parliament connects with the club idea.
Many of the traditional London clubs date back to the 1800s, of course, but this one is newer, just a couple of years old. Welcome to the Groucho.
It's a nice atmosphere. The reason that we join clubs like this, as opposed to, for example, a men's club, where the dividing line is, it seems to be there's a sort of horizontal dividing line between men and women, and I think some men perceive women as being totally different, and they like to get away from them. Now that's something I don't understand. I see a more vertical dividing line between people who I regard as undesirable, people I don't want to talk to, and people I do want to talk to. So I gravitate to a club like this. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the world consists of outside people are really fucked up and dangerous. In a club like this, they're fucked up and harmless.
It's like you're getting more fucked up as time goes by.
So,
but on the other hand, I mean, of course, one of the advantages of a men's club like my own Savage is that it's a chance to get away from the groupies. There is that aspect as well.
what groupies? I've never seen a groupie, but you're lucky, maybe.